Little house, remember, long, long ago.
Once upon a time, there was a little house on a little hill way out in the country. She was a happy little house, for she loved the country life, the peace and quiet, the warm sun on her roof, the whisper of the summer breeze round her eaves, and the sound of the meadowlark. And she just sat there all new and shiny. And pretty soon she heard the clop-clop of a horse coming down the country road. And it stopped in front of her new little walk, and a new bride and groom got out. They looked at each other, and they looked at the little house, and it was love at first sight. And then the happy new groom picked up the bride in his arms, and he carried her across the threshold into their new little house. And the little house was very happy. As time passed, the little house was filled with children, and the days were filled with happiness. It was only at night that the little house felt just a little lonely, and she wondered what it would be like to have other houses to talk to. And she would gaze wistfully toward the distant lights of the city, never realizing that all the time those lights were coming closer and closer. For the city is a restless thing that must always grow, and it grew farther and farther out into the country. And pretty soon the little house had neighbors on either side of her. "Welcome," cried the little house. "Welcome to the country." But the new houses were pretty elegant with their wide porches and their high gables, and they looked down a little on the little house. One night, both of her neighbors were having parties. "Well, I'm certainly in the center of the social world," thought the little house, "and the nights are not so lonely." One night, there was plenty of excitement. Smoke was pouring from the windows of the house next door. People were running and shouting, "Fire! Fire!" And there were flames shooting into the sky. The little house was afraid. She felt her windows growing hot. Sparks were flying all around, and suddenly the house on the other side of her caught fire. The little house was completely surrounded by flames that grew and grew until the night was bright as day. And the firemen were there shooting water, and the little house didn't know whether she was going to be burned up or drowned. And when morning came, the little house was all alone again, because the houses on both sides had burned down. And the little house, all she needed was a little patch on her roof. The years rolled faster now, and the little house had two new neighbors, big apartment houses, for this was the age of progress, and there were many people around, and there was much noise. And more years passed, and the apartments, well, they were tenements now, and the neighborhood was even noisier and dirtier and more crowded than ever. And all one winter, there was a big sign in the little house that said, "For rent." And she had an awful empty feeling inside of her. Nobody wants her. Nobody wants her. And the city grew. It was reaching upward now, higher and higher. Her new neighbors, they were skyscrapers, and they were so high above she couldn't even call or shout to them. She was hemmed in a deep, narrow canyon of darkness. And the neon signs, flashing on and off, didn't help. They only made her dizzy. Oh dear, what's to become of me now? Will I never see the sun again, or feel the gentle touch of the summer breeze, or hear the song of the meadowlark? And it rained so much. Even when it stopped, the raindrops hung in her windows like tears. Poor, forgotten little house. There's nothing left now, not even hope. One day, a big truck drove up in front of the little house, and she heard a gruff voice say, "There she is, boys." And another voice said, "That little old shack? Well, let's get it over with." Yes, thought the little house, get it over with. But, goodness, I shouldn't complain. I've had a very full life for a house, and they pulled her and pushed her and swung her in the air and chained her on the big truck. And she closed her eyes and kind of dozed. And after a while, the noises of the city grew quiet, and the little house began to feel a nice warm feeling in her old boards. I'm dreaming, she thought. But when she thought she heard a meadowlark, she opened her eyes, and she blinked in the bright sun. "Oh no," she cried, "it can't be." But it was. It really was sun and meadowlarks. She was back in the country again. It wasn't the end after all. It was only the beginning. Oh, it took a little time and a lot of fixing. And would you believe she looked just like new again? Well, she did. And she felt like new again, too. And then an automobile stopped in front of her, and a young bride and groom got out. They looked at the little house, and their faces were filled with happiness. And the little house thought back to a long, long time ago when a horse and buggy stopped in front, and another bride and groom got out. And she smiled because she knew she had once again found someone to love and cherish, and also someone to love and cherish her. And she opened her door very wide, and the young bride and groom went inside. They knew that the best place to find peace and happiness is a little house on a little hill way out in the country.